to order the special meeting of the Board of Trustees, Oak Grove School District on March 3rd, 2026 at 5:30 p.m. I'm moving to set the agenda. May I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda as submitted?
I motion to approve the agenda as submitted. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the agenda has been approved as submitted. 2.1, welcome to the special board meeting of March 3rd, 2026. Members of the public may address the board only with respect to the agenda items. The Brown Act governs meetings of governmental bodies in California. In accordance with Board Bylaw 9323, individual remarks will be limited to 3 minutes each as stipulated. The board reserves the right to limit discussion time on a topic to a specific amount of time. Once again,
2 minutes? There's a
oh,
lot.
it seems like we have a lot of public comment, so I'm actually going to be reserving my right to move it down to 2 minutes. I will remind people we're only to speak on the actual resolutions that are upon this agenda. I know people are concerned about other positions that the Budget Advisory Committee has previously discussed. That is not on the agenda today. Only the positions that are listed within the resolutions will be discussed today and can be commented on today. Please note that you are attending a public meeting of the Board of Trustees doing the public's business. This is not a public forum for public debate. We'll move to 3.1, resolution number 1542. Resolution to discontinue specific certified services for the 2026-2027 school year. Associate Superintendent Bowles.
Thank you, President Hebert, Board of Trustees, and Superintendent Chidas. Thank you so much for the opportunity to address you today for these 3 resolutions. Although all connected, they are all going to be presented separately, so we'll not be bundling them. But before I do start in presenting this first one, just wanted to say some words that do go ahead and apply to all 3 resolutions that will be before you today. I want to first begin by expressing appreciation to you all, our Board of Trustees, for your thoughtful leadership and courage during this critical time for our district as we continue to decline in student enrollment, face the end of one-time funds, notably ESSER funds, $26 million during and after COVID, and educator effectiveness funds that sunset this school year. And then also contend with the high cost of living in San Jose and working with our employees so that they can afford to live here in this valley. The decisions are not easy, they're complex, they're deeply impactful and rooted in a shared commitment in ensuring the long-term strength and stability of our district. So we recognize that those are not easy decisions for the board to make. These big levers and factors impact us in the need to identify areas in our budget that are on where there needs to be ongoing reductions, and those will be the resolutions that we present to you this evening. We are proud to honor and value our employees. Our recent historic raises are well-deserved and reflect the board's and the district's commitment to investing in the people who serve our students daily, many of those who are joining us this evening. At the same time, as with many school districts across California, funding realities require difficult balancing decisions and revisiting of priorities. Many other districts are also implementing workforce reductions to maintain fiscally solvent budgets. It is a difficult time across California as school boards are making difficult decisions. We know of 16 other districts of the county that have recently had to make similar decisions regarding layoffs, notably Oakland, I think over 400 somewhat recently, as well as Sacramento City and LA Unified in the thousands. But that being said, I want to take the opportunity to recognize the human impact of these decisions. Although I'll be talking about FTE or full-time employees, it is not lost on me or our human resources team that there are individuals behind each of these numbers. And we aim to continue to remember the humanity of the impact of these decisions depending on the board action that's taken this evening. We remain committed to supporting affected employees with compassion, transparency, and respect as anchored and reflected by our core values. Things like positive interdependence are core values that are easy to model when times are positive, but it's especially in times of challenge when that makes the most difference. And I also want to take this time to appreciate the collaborative nature of our union leadership. I am sure many who are in attendance tonight, even through some of these difficult conversations, they have always been open to discussion and conversation, even when there have been hard decisions and hard topics to discuss. We are continuing, and I want to recognize our Human Resources Department, notably Mark Lepori, Director of Human Resources, who works mainly with our classified staff, and our confidentials who have been working to stay connected, fielding questions from employees who have a lot of questions during these things that are going on. And we want to assure you that we will remain committed to remembering the humanity behind the numbers presented to you in this resolution today. So with that being said, we'll move on to the first resolution here. This special board meeting is being held to consider the issuance of layoff notices to certificated employees in accordance to California Education Code. State law requires that governing boards take formal action and provide written notice to affected employees on or before March 15th annually if a reduction in force is being considered for the following school year. If the board does take action tonight to approve this resolution, then this will authorize the district to issue required preliminary notices in person as part of the responsible fiscal planning and budget alignment. At the board meeting on December 11th, 2025, the board took action to address the fiscal obligations of the district. Among the measures proposed in the plan was a reduction in the district certificated staff necessitated by insufficient ongoing funds. The attached resolution lists those positions that are before you in the resolution. Under represented employee positions, we have a teacher on special assignment, or TOSA, and educational technology that's representative of one full-time employee. A teacher on special assignment, TOSA, English learner teacher partner, are also commonly referred to as ELTP. That's reflected of 2 full-time employees. And visual and performing arts teacher, these are positions that are funded out of general fund pre-Proposition 28, and that is reflective of 2 full-time employees. Additionally, on the list on the resolution, there are 2 positions under certificated administrator positions. One is principal on special assignment, POSA, public information officer, 1 full-time FTE, and educational service division administrator coordinator, 1 full-time FTE. By laying off these certificated administrator positions, that will officially remove these positions from the budget and on position control, so taking them thus off the books. Do want to note that these positions on the resolution will be meeting with our union leadership to discuss the effects of any decisions based on the board action this evening. There are situations with these certificated positions where the affected members in the position have rights back to the classroom, to a classroom position where they are qualified, depending on their credential. And we would then look at teachers who are the least senior on the seniority list based on their first day in probationary status. But as you know, we did offer an early tell incentive in December and January of this last year, of this year, and we did receive 23 either separations or resignations or retirements. So there is a possibility that through those positively assured attritions that we've been notified of, that we are going to really try to minimize the amount of layoff notices. Some districts will over notify or over lay off positions just as assurance, but as just kind of what do you call it, like insurance, I guess, but we are aiming not to do that. We know that that causes anxiety amongst our employees, and so our human resources team, and we will collaborate with all of our union leadership in the coming weeks through a meeting to show them what we've been doing in terms of seniority and who we know has bumping rights back to positions so that we can minimize over noticing employees. That is not our aim. And so, as I mentioned, we'll meet with OJ leadership specifically on these certificated represented positions to negotiate the effects of the reduction of the positions if the board does take action this evening. And our aim is to minimize, again, those written layoff notices where we are assured of attrition. We will not overnotice, and we will look at seniority rights back to the classroom positions, and those vacancies may minimize or eliminate the need for those layoff notices. So it is recommended that the Board of Trustees adopt resolution number 1542-03/26, the layoff of particular certificated services, thus reducing the number of certificated employees as presented.
Thank you. May I have a motion? And a second?
Second.
Any public comments? Okay, we'll start with Sarah Nolan. And after Sarah, we will have Nathan Pham.
Wasn't prepared. I didn't think I'd be first. Sorry. My name is Sarah Nolan, and I am currently in my 28th year at Taylor School. I've been a teacher there consistently and in Oak Grove, so I think my commitment for the district kind of shows in my years of service. I first want to thank the 4 board members who voted for our contract. We really appreciate it, and I wanted to make sure that you knew that we appreciated that. I'm here because I have a big concern about the recommended spending cuts to the certain positions that were just recommended by Superintendent Bowles. All of these cuts directly relate to the well-being and safety of our students, and I'm concerned that these are the cuts that were looked at and recommended, and I just wanted to voice my thoughts on those. First of all, I think that it was under the impression, because of the December 11th board meeting, that those cuts were, I just noticed that clock, that those cuts were somehow brought together in a good faith conversation between different stakeholders. And I think it's important to recognize that those positions that were on the list were predetermined and given to the group as the only thing to look at for the cuts. And I believe that if the group had been given a greater list or a greater opportunity to look at positions that maybe in the district office that might be redundant positions or positions that could maybe be blended together, similar to what teachers have to do, where they have to teach like combination classes or have larger classes for the purpose of like tightening our belts, that maybe we could have done something like that. Again, at the district office level, the idea of cutting school secretaries. Thank you.
We have Nathan Pham, and then we have Christina Chin.
Hi, my name is Nathan Pham. I'm from Parkview Elementary School. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. Like the classified members and certificate members and community members, we're here to share our concerns and thoughts. I just want you to really seriously think about, before you finalize the cuts, that like these positions are vital to the students' well-roundedness and optimal growth in learning, especially, for example, with technology, because it's vital. It's important skills that we need to have in this city. And the art, which is like, I was a part-time major in part in it, art, and that helps me think creatively. And people might not realize that art is it's not important, but it helps me to think creatively in how I approach my teaching. And in addition, the English, because some of the students in our areas are English learners, and if we cut that support, how are we going to help these kids reach optimal growth? And then also, how do we help them help their families survive and function and lead a good life in this area? So before you finalize these cuts, I think you seriously need to considered the negative effect it might have on kids and their families, and really make the right decisions for our families and the community. Thank you.
Good evening, board members. I urge you to vote no on the current budget cut proposal. This plan balances the budget on the backs of the people who work most closely with students every day. Cutting student-facing positions while leaving systemic inefficiencies untouched sends the wrong message about our priorities. Before eliminating services students rely on, we must first optimize what already exists. This means addressing district-level inefficiencies, redundant roles, overlapping responsibilities, and administrative growth without clear evidence of direct student impact. It also means reducing non-essential spending, including travel, conferences, and other discretionary perks during a fiscal crisis. We also need an honest conversation about healthcare contributions. Shared sacrifice must truly be shared, especially when higher paid positions contribute less out of pocket than teachers and classified staff for the same benefits. Additionally, reductions at the highest salary levels should be considered. We do not strengthen schools by protecting the top while hollowing out the middle. Stability comes from investing in the people who teach and support students daily. Finally, we must pursue revenue more aggressively through partnerships, facility rentals, and proper use of restricted funds. This district does not have a student cost problem. It has an optimization problem. Please reject this proposal and bring forward a plan that protects students and reflects our values. Thank you.
Next we have Luis Velasquez and then Bob Prolo.
Good evening, Board and Superintendent. We strongly oppose the proposed cuts that will harm students, staff, and school sites. These reductions are unnecessary and avoidable, the result of choices, not inevitability. The District Advisory Committee hasn't been a real bridge to the community. Before December, our only input was ranking a recycled list of cuts from years ago. We weren't allowed to add or remove ideas, so the process felt railroaded. While we spent January and February looking at basic supplies, books, utility codes, and software, an important discussion spending on consultants isn't even happening until next week. This isn't collaboration, it's a delay, while layoff decisions are already being made. Before eliminating positions or reducing student services, we demand that management examine other areas of the budget and make reductions that do not directly impact students. Responsible financial leadership means cutting discretionary and administrative spending first, not programs on staff who serve students every day. Fiscal responsibility also requires accurate revenue projections. In recent years, actual revenues have exceeded projections by an average of 12%, resulting in millions beyond what was budgeted. Decisions that impact students should not rely on consistently underestimated projections. This year alone, the first interim report shows that OGSD has received nearly $6.1 million more than originally projected. Rather than spending their surplus in services and in books and supplies, Oak Grove should use additional revenue to prevent layoffs that will harm students and staff. 3 critical actions the board must take. Number 1, immediately reduce services, consulting, and contracted spending. Number 2, freeze and roll back non-essential administrative costs. Number 3, prohibit district funding to any companies or foundations connected to executive leadership. Keeping expensive consultants and high administrative costs while cutting teachers and programs sends the wrong message that students aren't the priority. These cuts threaten the very heart of our district, our teaching, and our community. We should be protecting our strengths, not tearing them down.
Good evening, Board. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on this. Essentially, I'm going to reflect all of the concerns Luis just gave, but a little more than that. The Board gave management a directive to come back with alternative cuts that did not affect positions. And I am here asking that you make management accountable for that and that make them come with alternative cuts that do not affect positions that are valuable to students. So, you know, when we're talking about the positions, let's talk about real positions. Ed techs. You're going to cut our ed techs when you're spending millions of dollars on new technology that they need to train us on. So are we going to have paperweights in our classrooms that we don't know how to use? When we're talking about our TOSAs, those are the people that train and support our new teachers. Those are the people that train us in new programs, new adoptions. They support us with our English language learners. So All of these positions are extremely valuable. I would also be remiss if I didn't point out that these certificated management positions that are on the list for cuts are actually unfilled positions. So we need to be aware of that as well, and the cuts need to be spread consistently across. When we get down to the middle school level, when we're cutting things like community liaisons and secretaries, I'm concerned that we're shooting ourselves in the foot. Those are the people that actually help us increase our attendance. They're the ones that address problems with attendance. Attendance, I think everybody can agree, is a huge problem, and that's part of why we lose revenue. We need to preserve all of these positions, and we need to look elsewhere for cuts. Services and other operating in the last 5 years has more than doubled as a line item in our budget. In that time, our revenue has not doubled. That's where any cuts should be looked at, and that's where we need to hold management accountable to bring cuts in that area. Thank you.
We have up next Tiffany Paolini and then Catherine Gutierrez. Tiffany?
Mine's really short, I promise. First, thank you for helping with us getting our raises. It meant that I could refinance my loans so that I could pay it off faster. So I really appreciate that. Reducing our discontinuing services provided by our TOSA secretaries, community liaisons, instructional assistants, child care specialists, librarians, electricians, and custodians are vital to the functioning of our schools. It would mean that more responsibilities are put onto existing workers with no extra time and no extra pay. There's barely enough time in the day for our professionals to already do their jobs, and much less if we give them added responsibilities. What it means is that we're ending up cheating our employees and our students, because then we won't have that time and effort being put into our students as much as they are now. Mine was really short.
Hello, I don't know if you can hear me. Hi, I'm Catherine Gutierrez. I am a special ed teacher at Davis, and I'm also a parent, and I also grew up in Oak Grove School District. I am very proud to be a Oak Grove alumni, but I am very concerned about the cuts, especially so direct to students. And at a junior high and special ed, I'm constantly in contact with the school secretaries. I work with them every single day, multiple times a day, to contact parents, help with students. We talk about problems, people getting in fights, trying to mitigate that. Also community liaisons, and I really worry about also IT. They help get all kinds of programs on our computers for our special ed students. So there's so many aspects that you touch their lives, not only just something that they are entitled to, but also I feel that it leaves us open to more lawsuits. It leaves us open to more issues when we are not able to get the resources that we need for the teachers and for the students. And I do ask, I know there are trouble and budget issues not only for Oak Grove, but for many school districts. I turn on the news and we see it every day. And so I know we're looking to get students in the classroom, but I also think that we should look into school districts joining together and unions joining together to help bring these items to the state, bring them to the county, and how can we, looking at an even bigger picture, and how can we actually get funds for our school that we deserve and the students need.
Thank you. That's the end of public comment for this particular item. Board discussion?
I'll go ahead and start. So as we are facing these very difficult budget decisions and to be clear, this is very difficult, very challenging. I do want to be transparent about what matters most to me and the guiding principles that I use to drive my decision making. So first, for me, protecting classroom instruction and minimizing the impact on students is the highest priority. I think as a board, that does have to remain our North Star, and that is why each of us sits on this board, right, to prioritize the needs of the students that we serve. My second guiding principle is that we do have to continue exhausting operational efficiencies before reductions reach the school site. And that does include, looking at administrative structures, looking at contracts, and really reviewing our non-essential spending. My third principle is that we do have to apply an equity lens as well. So making sure that our most vulnerable students and student populations are not carrying that disproportionate burden. And finally, and I think this is also really key, is that our decisions, especially when it comes to school finances and budgets, is that we really have to strengthen our long-term plan, right? Not just postponing tough decisions like these and kicking the can down the road. With that said, I also do want to acknowledge some of the work that our administration has been doing, and that proactive steps have been taken. So I do trust that our exec team has taken real steps before bringing forward reductions that actually affect people. This does include not filling positions through attrition, restructuring departments, reviewing and reducing consulting contracts, renegotiating service agreements, freezing travel expenditures, and exploring additional revenue opportunities through facilities efficiencies, fee adjustments where appropriate, and also looking for grants. I do think that matters, and it shows an effort to protect classrooms first, and it really shows responsibility as stewards of public funds. Again, I recognize that this is very complex, and that there is a lot of red tape that's involved when we're looking at our funding streams and thinking about how that affects what we can do with our school budget. School finance is a beast. There are very real legal and fiscal constraints that we're working within. So with that in mind, I do have some clarifying questions that I would like to ask that would help the board and the community really understand the rationale behind the recommendations that you are putting forth. The first question that I do have is regarding the positions that are on the layoff list. Can you please clarify which ones were previously funded with one-time or restricted funds? And I know that you kind of talked to that, Amy, in regards to like the ESSER and the educator effectiveness block sunsetting. But if you could just restate that once more, which of these positions were funded, if any of them were, by one-time or restricted fundings, and how did the expiration of those funds factor into this recommendation?
Yes, I can answer. For certificated positions on the list, we have the Educational Services Division Coordinator Administrator position that was mostly funded by general fund, along with other federal and state restricted resources.
Did we think about how we would sustain any of these funds using general funds, like before funding it with like these like one-time funds? Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I mean, I can speak to from my previous experience in educational services. Annually, we take a look at funding of any ESD positions to maximize what is available to us. And sometimes it's multi-funded, but it also does then need to match up with the duties and responsibilities of the folks in those positions. So if there's a portion, we try to align it to percentage, but then those kinds of things do change from year to year. So that multi-funding can also change from year to year. But during during LCAP development, that is always discussed with our fiscal director and administrator in the room with Ed Services. So we have both the budget side of the house and the program side of the house, looking at how we can make most use of our any available one-time dollars, any other restricted funding. And so we have to first budget out of, prior to federal funding. Federal funding has to be associated last. It's called kind of the gravy on top of the mashed potatoes because you want to make sure you're not supplanting. But yes, that is a process that happens annually, and those allocations can change annually depending on what is available to us. But that is a priority in that budget planning that we do between Ed Services and business. And although I'm no longer in Ed Services, I know that that is still the case.
With regards to the ELT positions, I am curious whether Title III funding was evaluated as a potential source. And if so, what legal or physical limitations prevent us from funding those positions using Title III?
We have discussed the possibility of utilizing Title III funds for the ELTP positions. However, as I've mentioned, we have to exhaust all of our state funding before we look at federal funding. And so that's why supplemental funding has been utilized for that. Additionally, federal funding, namely Title III, comes with very specific restrictions and ability for what it is used for. We really try to do that to things that are for instructional support and other services. So items funded through Title III, for example, are things like the Summer Newcomer Academy, interventions, after-school tutoring, supplemental English learner curricular, and adult ESL. So that's not to say that the ELTP's work does not impact students, but we utilize things that directly are associated with student or student programs out of Title III. Title III is also subject to federal program monitoring, which is an intensive accountability structure. And so through federal program monitoring, we have somebody who comes in to take a look at and analyze and audit our books. And if we are not using those Title III funds correctly or as intended, then we are at risk of losing future funding under Title III. And as you know, Title III currently has been a little tenuous in terms of the future because it is federal funded and with this current administration. But so we do very carefully take a look at how to maximize that, but not just maximize it, but what is allowable, because we don't want to risk any future funding out of Title III through FPM.
In terms of the work that the ELTPs do, I am curious about what percentage of their day is direct student facing.
The needs also can depend on the school site because the population of English learners or multilingual learners vary, and also the profile of teachers at a certain school site may vary. So there may be at some sites when there's newer teachers on campus, as referenced in public comment, where there is more student-facing work of the ELTPs. They're modeling lessons, they're in there and modeling, doing demonstration lessons and such. They may also be helping, depending on their team, in annual testing and those kinds of things. We really do look at a model of where they're trying to help with the efficacy of teachers so that they can deliver those services and those strategies to students. But that is not to say that the ELTPs don't have a percentage of their time that is student-facing. It's just hard to say, depending on the school site needs. And again, the profile of the teachers. If there are newer teachers there may be some more direct modeling and teaching in the classroom that does occur.
So it sounds like the ELTPs offer, I guess, more teacher support and teacher professional development opportunities.
They do professional development on Tuesday meetings around EL roadmap or standards or strategies in integrated or designated ELD, and then also at AB days, we lean on them quite a bit for those opportunities to do professional development and training.
if their positions are removed, I do want to know what is the plan to, I guess, transition their responsibilities, right? Who takes on their workload if those positions are gone?
Yeah, so depending on, the board's action this evening, we do then engage in collaborative conversations with our union groups to talk about the effects of the layoff. So we need to discuss just that. How are we reconciling, right, the workload? How are we potentially looking at schedules? Ed Services does annually, they have been known to change what that ELTP support can look like, because percentages of multilingual learners does change from year to year at certain school sites. And so it's not out of bounds, or it is previous practice where we may reallocate ELT support. As you know, we're also a sealed demo district, and so we do have 2 school sites that are demonstration districts and may need more of a consistent support from the assigned ELTP to prepare teachers for that demonstration visit that may be coming up through SEAL.
And then my last question in regards to the ELTP positions are, how long have we actually had these positions for?
That is a great question. I would say, at least as a principal, and I was a principal at Parkview, actually, I can say it was at 2005, because I actually was a district coach at that time, a district data coach, and at that time we were transitioned then to ELTPs, and that was the year that I transitioned into an AP position. So I believe 2005 was when we made that transition to ELTPs.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
Can I find, how many of those positions do we have?
ELTPs? I can
In the
pull that
district?
up.
I mean,
have it.
obviously, we're
Yes.
removing 2, or the request to remove 2, but how many do we have?
Currently, we have 8.
8, so we would be down to 6, is what you're saying. Okay, thank you.
My next series of questions is in regards to VAPA. Regarding the VAPA teaching positions, can you help the board understand how the baseline and supplanting requirements apply here in regards to how we can use the Prop 28 funds?
Yes, so in a few years back, we had the state voters voted to approve Proposition 28 that gave more arts and music funding to school districts. We were ahead of the game in that sense that we had, even without those Prop 28 funds, we had visual and performing arts teachers. We had 2 VPA teachers at that time. Part of Prop 28 necessitates that districts could not supplant programs or positions that were already in place pre-Prop 28 with those dollars. So those 2 VPA positions have been funded out of general fund and continue to do so even after Prop 28. So because Prop 28 has been backfilled, or we had a year where we got funding but we hadn't started implementation, we do have available funds in Prop 28 that we could take a look at, but we can't just move those 2 VPA positions into those VAPA positions, that's visual and performing arts, because that would be supplanting, and that would put us at risk of losing funding because we are supplanting. So the aim here is to put these 2 positions on the resolution for a layoff, but then we would be looking at, and just so you know, I failed to mention that in future years, say that our fiscal outlook changes or our need necessitates us to have to repost for these positions that are on this list, all the employees who were laid off by these reductions have what are called 39-month rehire rights. So that means if the district does post the similar position within those 3+ years, the members who were affected by these layoffs have rights into those open positions. So in this case with VPA, if and when we do post then the VAPA positions that would then be paid for out of Prop 28 funds, then affected members in the VPA position would then have rights, those 39-month rehire rights. But as I mentioned, we do have scheduled meeting with our union leadership in the coming week, and so those are some of the things that we want to work out and discuss as a potential agreement, so that we can assure that we would have a landing place for the VPA positions that are here. But we can't just slide them into VAPA positions and change funding, because then we would risk supplanting, and then we would risk losing all of that Prop 28 money.
So just to understand, before Prop 28, we had 2 VAPA positions that already existed.
2 VPA positions,
Two
yes.
VPA positions that were funded from general fund.
And continued to be funded by general fund.
Okay, and we can't just move them into Prop 28 because of the supplanting. Is there, what are there rules around, so if we remove these positions, how quickly can we put them back on the list?
I mean,
If that makes sense.
we can post for those VAPA positions immediately, and then like I said, those 39-month rehire rights would apply.
So does that violate, though, that supplanting rule?
Our understanding is by officially laying off these positions and then hiring, because it's a VAPA position, not a VPA position, and paid for out of a different funding source, and we are not at risk for those supplanting risks and accountability out of Prop 28. So our ultimate goal is to retain the same number of VPA and VAPA positions, but this is our way of reducing the impact in the general fund and maximizing our Prop 28 dollars to do so while not supplanting.
Thank you. Does anyone need to piggyback on VAPA?
On that one, yes. My question in regards to the difference in what is offered under VAPA and then the VPA in regards to their insurance, in regards to any health care, any other.
All the
you know,
same.
All the same.
It's,
So it's
it's,
just,
they are all, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead.
Oh, they're all under the same bargaining group, and they would be on the same salary schedule and the same collective bargaining agreement.
okay,
and
so
yes.
nothing is lost in regards to just closing one, opening the other. Okay.
My last question is actually something that was brought up from public comment, and I would like to hear from Mark, because you were leading the Budget Advisory Committee. How were the list of positions created from that committee?
We did look at past reductions, and they are typical of the positions that are oftentimes looked at that are not directly in the classroom, facing students and all, because those are the ones that are least impactful, and our job is to do the instruction, and we try to support that instruction with TOSAs and all, but oftentimes those positions are the ones that are looked at first because they're not directly in front for instruction. So we looked at that list. We also looked at other things that are not positions that were part of the fiscal stabilization plan, like the iReady, like other reductions in contracts and business restructuring some of the business office and things like that too. So there were things in addition to what was on that proposal from the past, but that was what we built off of because they're very traditionally the things that are looked at for reductions away from the classroom.
Were there opportunities for the committee to, I guess, come up with other positions or to have discussions around other positions?
We talked about those, and we talked about other positions. It was hard. There were only a handful of meetings. When I initially tried to get a budget advisory committee together about a year ago, we weren't having a whole lot of interest in all, so it kind of became critical mass when we got the notification from the county that we had to create a fiscal stabilization plan. And with the short timeline, we went back to that old list to kind of look at what has been done before. We talked about the revenue side of things as well as the reduction side of things, and we talked about some non-classroom expenditures like license agreements and stuff, which we're diving into more deeply now.
Okay, yeah. Hi. In regards to the same thing, as far as what I remember, I believe you shared with us that you used a list from 2020 that had a list of positions that were already at that time going to be cut or going to transition or close, and I believe that that was provided to the community. Was that
That's
true?
the list we worked on to begin with. It was from a little earlier than 2020. It was like 2019 or so, I believe, but it was the previous reduction recommendations that were made to the board prior to COVID.
And then, as far as what happened to that, did those positions, were they were people laid off at that time? Again, this is before my time
Yeah,
on this board.
Some of those positions were reduced. We didn't look at those. Some of them had been reduced but came back because we had funding that came through with COVID. So for example, there were more ELT positions originally that went down, and then some came back, and they grew back again. So, but we looked at largely similar positions, and again, most of them being related to out of classroom directly.
Okay. And then again, regarding the name budget stabilization, I think when people hear that, they're a little laxed in regards to budget planning, budget stabilization, things like that. We get a full room when we say layoffs. When we say, this is going to happen, these are cuts that are coming. And I think there could have been a better way to be able to let the community and the teachers and people know how important it is for these cuts that are going to be happening. And they are layoffs, they're people's jobs. There's things that are gonna impact them, not just for today, but for the future. And so was there any talk about that while you were talking about how things would close as far as positions? Did it come forth? Again, I'm very simple in a sense, and I like things very plain, straightforward, and was it ever talked about? These positions, these people are going to have layoffs. We're not going to have this position anymore. These, again.
In the Budget Advisory Committee, those were the conversations at these positions, and we kind of were prioritizing, all right, if we had to choose which are the priorities, which ones would be the first year, which ones would be the second year. I'll say it was a challenge. I was asking principals and everybody, can I get more people? I wanted representation from the different learning communities. I invited the bargaining units to bring a couple people, and some of them did, and others weren't able to gather that. So it was hard to get people involved, unfortunately. We're doing better now that with the Budget Advisory Committee, and I think partly because the kind of reality is hitting home and people are becoming more engaged.
Okay. What I did see from an email that I received was that the communication wasn't there in student services. So as far as like what goes out to not just our teachers, but for families, that they weren't receiving that information clearly. That they didn't see what was happening in a clear way until it was too late in December, where this board voted and I declined, that, I was not voting on that. Because again, these are positions that are student served. What happened? I mean, I don't understand why or how the community feels that they didn't know. Do you sense that, Amy, or do you? I know Janae isn't here, and she's more the educational person that I would direct this not to you, Mark, but to Janae or even to Superintendent. I'm not sure if I can directly ask that question to you in regards to, I know that you have information that goes out constantly to the families, and we do pretty well. I know you have the monthly and meetings directly, community meetings. I don't see where the disconnect happened, where families are feeling that they did not know this was happening. Can you address that?
Thank you, Trustee Salazar Torres. In terms of families, I would need more clarification and more specific in terms of the communication. At the time when we were going through this process, we were in negotiations with all three associations. A lot of the advocacy at the time was to provide our employees with a fair raise. So a lot of the communication was around compensation. We did put out several budget advisory committees. It's on our website, so people, we also sent it on my biweekly community newsletter through Parent Square. There was ample, but I just would need more clarification in terms of the specific of this. In terms of these positions have been presented since December, publicly. But if you can give me that, I do want to let the board know that next Thursday, March 12th, we're going to have a presentation on the Budget Advisory Committee. So everything that you're asking, so you're preparing us for that presentation, which I appreciate. This evening, we're here for these resolutions. So we are going to present an update from the Budget Advisory Committee. We actually have a Budget Advisory Committee on March 11th. We asked principals, for each principal to shoulder tap and to identify a parent. So all 18 schools will have a parent at that next Budget Advisory Committee, and we have them by name and their emails. Today, Associate Superintendent Evans invited them all. So I appreciate the board's direction at the last meeting to do that. And today, these are ongoing conversations. They are not easy by any means. They're complex. And we want more voices, we want more advocacy, we want more direction from the board. We serve at the pleasure of the board. You give us direction, then we go do it. But this is something, I just want to let you know that we are going to continue this conversation at the next several board meetings in terms of, and we can always do better at communication. So thank you for that feedback.
Of course. I know that one of the things that came to mind, and maybe Amy, you can answer this, in regards to as far as what I'm understanding, and again, maybe I'm not understanding this 100%, but so the full extent of the layoffs would be a worst case scenario as far as what's happening. But the district is required by state to send notices to potential reductions in force by March 14th, which is what we're doing today. The district may reduce the number of notices after the state budget is revised in May, correct? So the district is required to send those laid-off notices by March 15th, per se, but they can be rescinded before the state's May 15th deadline. So do we foresee possibilities in having anything rescinded before that? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for that question. Yeah, as I referenced earlier, we do have districts that take advantage of that in the sense that they will over-notify, right? They will over-serve layoff notices because March 15th is that preliminary notification that you may potentially, or your position may potentially be laid off. That is, then we take a look at, as I mentioned, that there are opportunities through positively affirmed or assured attrition where we see, because we still have certificated staff, we still have until the end of June for them to resign for the next school year. We may continue to get more resignations in the coming months or, as we move forward. So in those cases where we can give them another position or they can get transfer rights or bumping rights into positions, that's not to say that the reduction of the positions may not still happen, but then we can still work together to see how we can minimize the effects of a layoff so that we can still work to give our employees another position of employment within the district based on what may come in these months. And then with, like I said, with the early tell, we had those 23 notices. They did not all fall within these positions that are on the resolution, but some did. And so that will help us minimize or not have to give a preliminary layoff notice in some of those situations. You're welcome.
Okay.
Question. One more. Sorry. In regards to our resolution, what stays in regards to whom and what position, would there be an opportunity to pull from that at all? Or once the resolution is what it is, it stands in regards to those particular positions? What I'm saying is, obviously, there's some that I agree with. The VAPA should be gone. The POI should be gone. There's certain positions that should not even be on there. So they should be out of our budget so that we can bring up our budget. Obviously, there's some positions that I don't believe that should be taken away. And so I'm conflicted in that. And so I'm not sure where we are in the resolution to be able to amend resolution, Or is that something that we vote for? Or is that something that we can do? Is that at a later time? No. So, again.
If you'd like to make an alternate motion and you had a position number and to put up, they would have to be supplemented. Yeah.
Supplemented in here. Okay, yeah. Okay, thank you.
And I think that kind of goes to my comments. I think what we're really looking at, as we've kind of explained on some of these position eliminations, is that we have 3 positions that will actually be getting a possible layoff notice, who have an opportunity to come back into the district immediately, because we will have positions open for the teachers on special assignments within our district, because we have 26 early tells. So many of them are certificated teachers. We have 2 VAPA positions who will be hired right back. And then 2 positions where are currently funded but are not, there are no person in that position, so we actually don't have to give the termination. We're eliminating that code, and we no longer have to fund that position. And so while this looks and is difficult, because we are talking about people who are behind that, and it's nerve-wracking when you receive a layoff termination, there's opportunity for everybody to be back into the Taylor School District and serve us. And we have to do it by March 15th. That's why we had to do a special meeting, or we lose the ability to make these adjustments later, which means we'll have to make significant cuts in other places, which we are already doing through other actions that are not included in tonight, because we're not limited in the same statutory deadline, such as when we eliminate contracts or when we're eliminating other portions in extra paper or supplies. That can happen at any time when we're doing our budget. As the community knows, we've been working through this fiscal stabilization process due to enrollment decline and rising operational costs. Over the past, several years, the district has experienced significant decrease in enrollment, and actually it's 17% in the past few years where we've seen an enrollment decline. At the same time, many of the same funds are being eliminated because we received an onslaught of funding for the pandemic and they've expired. These factors is why the board has begun to discuss the fiscal stabilization earlier this year, and why the Budget Advisory Committee has been meeting to review expenditures and potential reductions across the district. None of these discussions are easy, but our responsibility as trustees is to ensure that Oak Grove remains fiscally stable while continuing to provide a good educational programs for our students. Tonight's resolution is part of meeting our legal obligations while continuing to work through this budget process in a thoughtful and responsible way. Which is why I'm going to be supporting this resolution tonight. I think at the end of the day, this resolution is as minimal as we could have got to at this point through our budget discussions. And so I will be supporting it. Any comments? Okay, we have a motion and our second already. May I please have a roll call vote?
Member Yolaka? Member Torres?
Nay. No.
Vice President Yu?
I will also vote aye.
President Eber?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. We are now moving to 3.2, Resolution 1543, Determination of the Tiebreaking Criteria. Associate Superintendent Bowles.
Thank you, President Hebert. So this second resolution is connected to the previous one, in the event that we need tie-breaking criteria, if people on the seniority list based on their first date and probationary status are equal, we may not need to invoke this tie-breaking criteria, but we need to establish one in the event that we have that. As I mentioned before, we're hoping that through positively assured attrition, we will minimize the need for layoff notices. But in the event that we do have a tie on the seniority list, for the folks who have rights back into a classroom, then we look at the seniority list to what positions they are authorized to teach. And so the governing board is required to determine that the district needs, should it become necessary, to establish the order of layoff for employees who first rendered paid service to the Oak Grove School District on the same day. And so, for example, we have ELTPs who have rights back to to a teaching position in which they are qualified, 2 of them, but let's say we have 3 teachers with that same seniority date of first day of probationary status. How do we determine which 2 of those 3 would be the ones to then potentially receive a layoff notice? Again, we hope not to have to enact this tie-breaking criteria through positively assured attrition. This criteria shall be used to determine which permanent or probationary certificated employees will be retained in lieu of layoff, and to establish the order of reappointment if the number of employees is subsequently increased or the discontinued service is reinstated. So as I mentioned, there is 39-month rehire right. So let's say that we do then repost any of the positions, we would also use the tie-breaking criteria the other way in the order in which we would reach out to folks if those 39-month rehire rights apply. And so you can see in the attached resolution, this is for the 25-26 school year only. If we are in the same position next year, we would need to bring back this resolution like we would any layoff resolution in future years. You can see here there are 7 areas in which members can receive a point. If we do need to determine tie-breaking criteria, we would send out like a survey to the folks who are affected, the members who are affected, and they can then let us know which of these things do apply to them, and they would receive a point for each one. So that starts with the type of credential held. If the member has a clear credential, that means their induction requirement is completed, and they hold a clear credential, that is 1 point. Additionally, if they have 10 or more years of K-12 public school teaching experience, that is another point. Possession of more than 1 credential, 1 point for each credential. For example, if you hold a credential in special education or an administrative credential. Possession of an authorization to teach an additional subject matter would also be an additional point. Possession of a bilingual authorization or a BCLAD is an additional point. Possession of a master's degree would be 1 point additionally, and a possession of a doctorate degree, 1 point. So that's what we would utilize. And then even after all that applies, in the event that there is still a tie amongst the folks who are being considered, then you will see noted below that list that every employee gets a random, what is called a seed number from the CTC. And so that's a state employee identification number. The seed number is a random number that's issued to certificated staff when employed by a district. I'm sorry, not by CTE, but CTC, but employed by the district. It is random. And then the person with the lowest seed number would be the employee first affected by a layoff notice. If in the very unlikely event, we have to use this tie-breaking criteria, and then further, if after all these 7 points there is still a tie, then we would look at the random assigned seat number. So it is recommended that the Board of Trustees approve Resolution Number 1543-03/26, establishing the process for determining tie-breaking criteria in accordance with California Education Code Sections 44955 and 44956 as presented.
May I have a motion? And a second? Second. Okay, public comment?
There is none, President Aber.
Oh, for the next one. Oh, okay. Any board discussion? There's no public comment on this one. Okay. May I have a roll call vote?
Member Yolakar? Aye. Member Torres?
Aye.
Vice President Yu,
Aye.
President Hebert.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay. We'll move to 3.3, Resolution 1544, 326, resolution to discontinue specific classified services for the 26-27 school year. Associate Superintendent Bowles.
Thank you, President Aber. This is the last resolution we have to bring forward for the board's consideration this evening. So again, this special board meeting is being held to consider the issuance of layoff notices to classified employees in accordance to California Education Code. State law requires governing boards to take formal action and provide written notice to affected employees on or before March 15th if reduction in force is considered. The board, if determined or approves or votes to approve this resolution, then that also further authorizes the district to issue required preliminary notices in person as part of the responsible fiscal planning and budget alignment. Similar to what I shared for certificated, we also will do our best. Our aim is not to overnotice, and so we have looked carefully at members who are affected by this resolution, not to preemptively assume that you are going to approve it, but just so that we are prepared with what the next steps in the process would be that are fair and legal and are supportive of the employees' rights based on seniority and ed code. At the board meeting, again, as mentioned before, on December 11th, 2025, the board reviewed and developed an alternate budget plan to address the fiscal obligations of the district. And among the measures proposed in this plan was a reduction in the district's classified staff necessitated by insufficient ongoing funds. So of the reductions presented in this resolution, the following, just so that you are aware, are either currently vacant or have received confirmation of resignation or retirement, or as we call it, positively assured attrition. Administrative secretary is currently vacant that supports ed services. Management, Chief Operations Officer, currently vacant. Management, Human Resources Confidential Secretary, currently vacant. So again, those would then, if approved, would be off the books and then also for future budgets and off of position control. And then we have 2 community liaisons, 2 FTE listed here on the resolution. And through the early tell process, we did get positive assured attrition confirmation for 2 positions, both through resignation and retirement. So the elimination of these classified positions, and I'll list them here as I did with certificated, includes classified administrators outlined in the attached resolution will result in ongoing savings of $1,398,556 in expenditures for the district in the 2026-27 fiscal year. On the resolution, you'll see the list of positions here in this resolution. Underrepresented employee positions, we have administrative secretary, 1 full-time employee, secretary, and that is at the intermediate schools, and that is 2.625 FTE. Just so in case there was maybe some confusion of, well, why is there not a whole number there? It means, for example, the secretary, it's 3 7-hour positions. And so an FTE is calculated, or a full-time employee is calculated at 8 hours. And so a 7-hour position is calculated at 0.875 FTE. And so when you multiply that by 3, that's how you get the FTE, or the full-time employee equivalent. That is full-time equivalent that's noted here. Community liaisons, we're at 2 full-time equivalent or full-time employee. Instructional assistant biliterate, these are specifically ELD instructional assistants, 1.5 FTE. Child care development specialist, center specialist 3, 1 full-time employee. Library clerk, specifically at the intermediate schools, 1.375 FTE. There's variance in hours there, which also makes up the not rounded to a full number FTE there. Electrician, 1.0 FTE, and custodian, night and midday, 1.5 FTE. Also in this resolution, you'll see listed classified administrator positions, chief operations officer at 1.0 FTE, and human resources confidential secretary, 1.0 FTE. As I mentioned, they're currently vacant, but this layoff, if approved, will then officially take them off of position control in our budget for future years. And so That is a resolution presented to you regarding certificated staff. It is recommended that the Board of Trustees adopt Resolution Number 1544-03/26, the layoff of particular classified services, thus reducing the number of classified employees as presented. I may also, if I may add, assure you that we have scheduled times with both our CSEA and ASME union leaders in the coming week to discuss the effects of this resolution depending on board action this evening.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
And I'll second that. Move to public comments. First, I have Emilio Castro and then Sarah Rodriguez. We have Emilio Castro. No, I'm Sarah. Okay, Sarah?
Hi, my name is Sarah. I have two children in the school district, one in elementary and one in junior high. Mr. Lepori here actually helped my daughter with her IEP. If it were not for Mr. Lepori and the counselors in this school district, my child would be a very different child today. You guys speak a lot about safety and you guys speak a lot about budgets, but when you make these decisions, it affects our children. We live with the lifelong decisions that you make today. And I'm letting you know right now, we're not gonna stand idly by while you rip apart the counselors and the school liaisons. I can't believe we're even discussing a school liaison being cut from Burnell, a 17-year receptionist, and a counselor. These are pillars in our community. As someone who's on the front line, as an activist for rapid response, I work with the community hand in hand, face to face. This will cripple our students. These parents and these teachers are telling you exactly what we need. They deal with these kids every day, and I can't believe that we are subjecting them to budget cuts. I can't tell you how incredibly imperative it is, and the structure and the heartbeat of the community, our counselors, our school liaisons in the house, helping these kids, being that bridge, figuring out what works for them. We are dealing with an administration that's tearing us apart. ICE is in these streets, and these kids are scared. And this liaison and this counselor is a cushion for them. That front desk receptionist is a face of recognition and comfort. We can't do it. You will see my face. I love you all, and I've been a big person for fighting for community in this community. I grew up here. I have an elementary friend right behind me. You will see my face. Please don't climb me on my bluff.
Good evening. I'm a library clerk at Bernal. I've been library clerk for the last 25 years. But tonight, I'm the voice of one of my students. Today, one of my students wrote this, and I had to just read it. His name is Moses Miranda. He's an 8th grader. As an 8th grade office assistant, I see the constant workload from every staff member, and I believe that our school is perfect the way that it is. Staff members here work together as a team, and it unites the school together. However, removing positions will disassemble the great team of workers we have here at Bernal. Mrs. Eileen, which is the secretary, Mrs. Romina, myself, and Mrs. Ochoa, the counselor, play a big role in shaping the Bernal Intermediate we know of today. Also, they take on tasks that many would back down from. Middle school children are tough to work with, but our secretary, English and Spanish-speaking counselor, and our librarian, they take control of challenging situations with handling not only students, parents, guardians as well. Ultimately, I believe as a student attending Bernal Intermediate, removing these positions will be a great liability to school, staff members, and to the students that they made connections with. Therefore, to keep Bernal Intermediate running in the great path that it's going in now, we need to keep and cherish these positions and the roles they play in children's lives. So you guys, I know you have a tough job, but these positions directly affect the students. And if we ask them to achieve high, but we're not giving them the tools to achieve it. We are the tools. Teachers, staff are the tools for students to achieve the goals.
I have Nathan Pham next, and then Mariana Serrato.
Hi, thanks for giving me the opportunity. Like all these concerned, caring people in this boardroom, I'm an advocate for some of these classified employees. I know that community liaisons been with us for years. They're the bridge between the families and our school and our community. And without them, I mean, it's hard enough that we're not fluent in some of these languages, and they're the one that translate for us and communicate with the parents when the kids don't show up or when there's a problem. And then sometimes I see them doing more than what they're required by the job description. I see them out during yard duty, monitoring kids, checking on how well they're doing, asking how they're doing. And these kids look up to these people. I mean, you're like the role father or mother figures for them, or it's someone to come and consult with when they're having problems. It's a disservice for them, for us to cut them, because they have been with us for years of supporting our families and our teachers and even the district itself. And then also, we want kids to be biliterate or multilingual, but we're not supporting them by cutting some of these IAs. In addition, these cuts, we need to really rethink what we're planning to cut, because it's going to affect the way the growth of these kids, there's social, emotional, and well-being, and optimal growth. Let's see. And then I was overhearing that Ashby president saying that we only have one electrician for this whole district. It's kind of scary. I mean, it's like when we had a weather problem, it was not good news, especially in the media, that we're having so much problem with the school site and the electrician and the electricity and the water problem. So I would really think about it before you make the cuts.
After Mariana, we will have Chuck Baylor.
Good evening, board members and executive team. My name is Mariana Garcia Serrato, 16-year STEM teacher at Adventure and resident of Orrding Area 5. I support fiscal responsibility, but responsible budgeting means aligning decisions with the LCAP goals that this board has already adopted. Fiscal caution cannot come at the expense of those commitments. Goal 1 commits the district to ensuring all students meet or exceed Common Core standards and develop 21st century skills, yet instructional staffing is being reduced. Goal 2 promises accelerated achievement for multilingual learners and historically underserved students, yet ELTPs and ELD 8 hours are reduced. Goal 3 promises inclusive environments for students with disabilities, yet one-to-one supports and psychological services are reduced. The strategic goal promises innovation that enhances learning, yet Anetectosa and site software are reduced. Goal 4 promises meaningful family engagement, yet community liaisons are eliminated. Goal 5 promises safe and supportive school environments, yet counselors, secretaries, maintenance, and custodial staff are reduced. Reducing teachers deepens this misalignment. Teachers implement the LCAP goal in real classrooms. There is no path to proficiency, inclusion, or equity with fewer teachers. When teachers are reduced, individualized attention shrinks and students feel it immediately. When student support staff, counselors, secretaries, community liaisons, and maintenance staff are reduced, our communities feel it immediately. When EL and special education staffing is reduced, our most vulnerable students feel it immediately. At that point, the LCAP becomes wishful thinking, filed away in a document somewhere. I urge you to vote no tonight and request that district management return with a proposal that aligns the budget with the LCAP and protects the students and families we serve. 5 seconds. Last time that we were here, Board Member Joe Bouchard, You asked for what can we do to bring back students into our classrooms. I remind you that Adventure and original Tweeby were done.
I'm sorry,
were-
ma'am, we have
yeah,
to end the
sorry.
comments. Thank you.
All right. Hello, I'm Chuck Baylot, CSCA Union President. In general, when I compare myself to Louise and Bob, I generally think of myself as the less argumentative union president. But I got to tell you, I'm a little frustrated today. First of all, I had a statement to give you guys that was very long. I already had to shorten it and type it so I could read it and hope I got enough time. And then you cut it down to 2 minutes. I'm not going to even bother reading it. But I gotta say, it's inappropriate that this is being discussed at a special meeting. This should be at a regular board meeting where when you're making a decision this big, you have to allow bargaining unit presidents to speak and the union to speak. It needs that, and you need to have more time between us and the date that's coming. My speech was gonna be on messaging and optics and mixed messages and optics going here, but I gotta cut straight to the ask. Our group, if you look at it, we have the most FTEs on there. We have the most people, but not just FTEs, based on what I've heard earlier before. With management, it's all vacancies. And with, now I don't want any of this classified staff to be affected, certificated staff affected or laid off. What I understand based on what we're hearing here is that they're not actually going to be out of a job. There's no one actually getting pink slip, layoff slip, and go. So I don't even view these as layoffs. We're the only ones, and maybe ask me, I'm not sure, I don't want to speak out of turn, but we're the ones getting all the actual cuts, people being let go. And I want it to be more fair. I don't want them to go up. I don't even really, I don't want anything to happen to any of them, and I'd rather see no position cut, but that's it. So I'm going to go back to try to say some of the stuff I was going to say. But my ask is that if you're going to consider anything on our list, that you look at.
I'm going to afford you an additional minute.
Okay. I ask if you're going to consider this resolution. You just right now look at the vacancies and then regroup, and let's make a decision in 26, 27. And in the meantime, you can do attrition and all that and find those possibilities. That's my ask for now. We went into bargaining. We were given a presentation. I believed it. I trust Mark. I still believe it. I'm not and our negotiations team settled for 2%. All right, and we got some pushback for it. Hey, we got another bargaining unit out there. Why are you taking 2%? At the time we had to sell that, we believed it was only that's what we could get because we're in a bind. And then now. But I didn't know 5% was going to be on the table. And I want to thank OGA. We appreciate your efforts, and my staff is very thankful for the raise. And I've gone over time, and my train of thought, I can't keep on it, but that's it. Thank you.
I have Catherine Gutierrez and then Barbara Sutton.
Hello, I'm Catherine Gutierrez at Davis. In special ed, the secretary and the community liaison, our counselor, library clerks are so valuable to special ed. Our secretaries, they have so many roles. They don't answer just the phones and call parents, which is very important, but they help de-escalate numerous potential fights. They help with discipline. I've had a student who this year kept hitting people, and we were trying to find a consequence for them because they need to learn that hitting people is not appropriate. And I had a quick conversation with admin, but the secretary is the person who scheduled the discipline. The secretary was the one who followed through to let me know, was this completed? Was it not completed? The secretary was the one who followed up and, okay, do we have any more occurrences? What's going on? That's the person that followed up with me. Admin is great, but they're very busy. So there's other roles that they do. We have people who change in alternate locations. The secretaries facilitate that, making sure they're in a private area that they change in and are okay. You know, if we have an issue during the day, they are there. I have the secretary's phone number on my phone. I texted them just this week. So-and-so is cutting. Here we go. Like, there are so many things that they do every single day, and I feel like that's not being valued. Same thing with a counselor. We have at Davis, we have so many cell phones because we are constantly in communication. The counselors have helped so much with students and their families. I know I'm running out of time. The library clerk as well. The library clerk, we have so many students. This is so important. They're moving from elementary school to junior high, and many of them are moved from an SDC environment into an RSP environment. And with that, there are a lot of changes, and they are used to having an IA with them during break and lunch. And in junior high, they don't have that. But they do have the library. We have the library open where they can go and have a quiet space where they have direct supervision. And I just feel like, yeah, there's so many things that we're not looking at. You just think, oh, they're library clerk. They check out books. They do this. But there are so many aspects to all these people that help build our community, keep our students safe. I don't think we're looking at the whole picture. Okay, thank you.
We have Barbara Sutton and then Christine Hoganesh.
Collectively, I am on year 32 of serving the educational system in California. And what I grow tired of hearing is without the classified, we cannot run this ship. We don't have a bus driver if we don't have classified. We don't have a plumber to unclog the toilets if we don't have a classified. I promised myself I wasn't going to start out gruff. People that know me, I'm kind of in character, but I'm going to digress. I stand before you not just as an employee or a community member that pays taxes in this district for 20 years serving Oak Grove. This has been my family. This district, prior to many people in this room, supported me 15 years ago in the loss of my husband. After 3 years of living in San Jose, I'm alone. They supported me a year and a half ago with the death of my mother. This is my family, the secretaries at the school sites. I'd like to challenge each and every one of you as board members, because I too, in Northern California, served as a board member for 3 years. So I know what you're sitting there doing. I challenge each one of you not to show up to read a book for Dr. Seuss Day, but to walk in the shoes of a school site secretary. Not for 5 minutes, not for a cup of coffee, not because you're a parent and you've glided through there, but be present. Because these people are, in the words of many HR, not Amy, but superintendents, without the classified, who are the backbone of every school district, we cannot soar. We cannot fly. Respectfully, these people, you have no idea how far they go above and beyond. No idea. You can assume being a teacher in a classroom, but if you don't spend time in there, you don't know. Because once we lose the people who hold our schools together, the health clerks, the attendance clerks, the secretaries, the bus drivers. No budget correction can ever fully restore what was lost. So I'm asking you to table your motion tonight, and again, take a good chunk of your day to go visit, sit at a middle school and watch them roll. Please.
Okay, all right. Good evening. I'm Christine Hoganesh. I teach over at Herman Intermediate School. First, I want to say thank you for the recent contract settlements. The raises represent a meaningful step in valuing our educators. I'm also pretty relieved tonight to see that our academic counselors are not on this list for the reduction in workforce agenda. I urge you to continue preserving these vital positions as they are the frontline triage for these developing adolescents we work with. However, a supportive school environment requires a full team, and I'm deeply alarmed by the remaining proposed cuts. Leaving a campus of nearly 700 students with only one office secretary is a severe safety risk. One person cannot simply simultaneously manage parent calls, triage sick or children in crisis, process visitors, and maintain campus security. Furthermore, eliminating our community liaison severs a vital bridge for our most vulnerable families. In a diverse community like ours, the liaison does so much more than just translate. They build trust. They help parents navigate a complex school system, connect families in crisis to essential outside resources, and ensure every guardian feels equipped to be an active partner in their child's education. Cutting this position effectively shuts the door on families who rely heavily on that targeted support. Crucially, both the liaison and the secretary are primary drivers of student attendance, which is directly tied to our district's revenue. By cutting the very staff who track absences, break down what the root cause barriers are to truancy, and engage families to get these kids to school, we actually risk a drop in daily attendance that will ultimately create a much larger fiscal deficit. What are you going to do then? I fear the board has not truly considered this financial ripple effect at the intermediate schools. Do I have time? Oh. As you navigate difficult budgets and consider future cuts in coming years, I urge you to always center the direct human impact on our students and their families. If upcoming budget updates allow for financial flexibility, I implore you to immediately reconsider and restore these critical positions and resources if you truly do feel like you need to cut them tonight. Thank you for your time.
We have Holly Ennis and then Jorge Prado.
All right. So good evening. My name is Holly Ennis, and I'm a parent. I have 2 kids. I have a son in 4th grade and a daughter in 6th grade who has special needs. I also serve on the district advisory committee, and and I really appreciate working with all of you and getting a better understanding of how things work. Man, 30 seconds already. Okay. So I wanted to start by acknowledging that this is really hard. This is a really hard time, and I understand that, and we're all here for the kids, right? Like, I know that all of us want what's best for the children. Having a sound budget is also in their best interest. So I completely understand the challenges that are being faced. My concern tonight is that it seems to be a cluster of support roles that are kind of on the chopping block, and they're being discussed for tonight as well as in the larger reduction plans for the future. And so community liaisons, English language learner support staff, special education and mental health support, secretaries who wear so many hats and hold these school communities together. They sit in different parts of the budget, but in practice, they serve many of the same students, the children who need the most support in order to be successful in school. At the same time, we look at national and state trends. We're actually seeing an increased need for mental health support, special education needs. All of these needs are rising, so I'm concerned that dwindling support will result in significant problems. Many of these positions being discussed are also held by some of the lowest paid staff in our district, but they're often the people working most closely with our highest need students. I know that none of these decisions are being made lightly, but when support systems thin out, the impact doesn't always show up immediately in a spreadsheet. It shows up later in struggling classrooms, overwhelmed teachers, and families in crisis, as my family has been in the past. I believe the strength of a community is defined by how it supports its most vulnerable members. And the students most affected by these decisions are counting on us to get this right. Thank you.
Good evening, Madam President. Oh, my paper. This paper is important, quite important. Whatever affect once directly, affect all indirectly. Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King. Thank you, every single one of you. Thank you for spoke on behalf of my brothers and sisters, and I will do the same for my other brothers and sisters in the other unions. Again, I've been saying this for the last 3 board meetings. In any of these lists, I see that coordinators, directors, executive team take at least 1% of their salaries. I'm not going to say don't affect directly the classrooms. That will be a lie. I'm not saying your jobs are not important. That will be a lie. But you're not there. I was late today to the first 3.1 point because I'm hosting a parent meeting, Latinos parent meeting in Spanish. How many of you speak another language? I know 2 of you. But are you willing to be there for every single translation, Spanish speaking? No, you don't have the time. Some of them don't speak other language for any given reason. I learned another one to support the families in the district. Now it seems like I cannot keep helping. I don't care. I'm going to keep doing it. See, makes sense? Because that's me. When another kid from a different ethnicity, you call them race, comes and tell you, I see you as my uncle, as my granddad, as my big brother, you have a kid that will work with you for the rest of his life. And you might not even remember them, but they remember you because you impact them. That's all. Every single one of us. That's what we do. So reflect on that. 2 positions, and I'm going to go over, I apologize for that, but 2 positions of district community liaisons that are not going to be open again. That means 3 of us needs to do all 16 schools. Then we're going to be banished if the trend keeps going. Which one of you is going to go to do a home visit on a gang member family, explain them why it's important they come to school, why grades is important, why they need to be aware of whatever they're doing, and come back to your side alive? Which one of you is going to go and tell them and sit down with the girl or with the boy, lock in the bathroom, convince him to come to school because education is the most important thing they can have? And that's not me, that's Mr. Malcolm X and every single one philosopher that knows education is important, and we are education. So please, positions that are not open, okay, yes, gone, by all means, no problem. But not reopening positions that are visual and important to this district, that will be a big mistake. Let's think that for a second. Let's meditate about that. And then when you go to bed tonight and try to sleep, ask yourself, did I make the right choice? What it will be about my kids that are still in this district? Sorry for the extra time. Thank you so much for listening.
Board discussion?
Yeah. So last month we stood before this community and last month I stood before this community and I shared my deep concerns regarding the OGEA contract. I spoke clearly about our structural deficits, our declining enrollment due to lower birth rates on children born in our area decreasing by 20% between the last two census numbers, and the enrollment in public schools in Santa Clara County decreasing by 15% year over year, and the hard reality of what Proposition 13 has done for our area. I argued then openly and transparently that we could not afford a compounding increase without making painful sacrifices elsewhere. Tonight, those sacrifices have arrived in the form of a staff reduction. There is no satisfaction for me in being right about a forecast that ends in someone losing their job. To have warned about this last month, only to see these reductions on the agenda tonight is a tragedy for this district. Due to our parity clause in contract negotiations, you will see us voting again soon to increase the salaries again for fellow unions to align with OGEA. This action today isn't a win for fiscal oversight. It is a profound loss for our staff and the children they support. It is important for the public to understand the direct line between these two events. We do not have a magic pot of money. We have a finite budget, and the math has caught up to us today. When we increase ongoing labor costs beyond our actual revenue growth, we are forced to reduce our full-time equivalent counts just to keep the district solvent. We're now losing essential positions, the very people who support our classrooms and make our campus safe and operational to fund these raises that were approved last month. This is not a one-time fix because these raises and benefits are ongoing and compounding, and the pressure on our staffing levels will continue through 2026 and 27. We are essentially mortgaging our future staffing to pay for today's contract. My heart truly goes out to the employees that may be impacted of these actions that the board takes today. We have put ourselves in an unattainable position of asking fewer people to do more work with fewer resources. This is not the norm. My goal is and always will be, what can we do to bring more opportunities for students? Let me be clear, the children are the ones that bring the revenue to this district, and if we're not enriching their education, providing their better education, then we will see a further decline. To my colleagues, moving forward, we must stop reactive budgeting. We cannot continue to approve costs first and then look for cuts later. We need a long-term plan that balances fair compensation with the preservation of student-facing services that actually attract families to our district. If we do not protect our schools and our programs, we will never have the sustainable revenue needed to truly support the children we teach. Ayud.
I have some questions. If these reductions occur for the secretaries, how are the remaining front office responsibilities going to be distributed? What duties shift to other classified staff, administrators, or reassigned across sites?
Red light is on. Thank you for that question. I can't answer that question here because that is a negotiable topic with our unions. And so based on the board action that's taken tonight, they do have the right to negotiate the effects of layoffs if that is the decision of the board this evening. And so we would be working in collaboration and in continued communication with them to discuss what those effects would look like.
Can we clarify what the current front office staffing model looks like right now?
This
for
is
each middle school?
For intermediate schools, there is one school secretary, and then there is one secretary. And so they are two different job descriptions, and they sit at two different ranges currently. And so there is one, I don't want to call main, but it is identified as school secretary and one secretary. In my experience, when I was working as an administrator in intermediate school, the jobs are delineated somewhat the same across the different school sites, but you know, there is one that focuses more on registration. We also have an attendance clerk, which I know was up for consideration, but is not on the resolution for reductions tonight. They help support with attendance. That's not to say that the other secretaries don't also, help in those areas, but that role there is an attendance clerk who isn't always housed in the front office. And so, there are in some cases, one may support the assistant principal and the duties there, and the other the secretary, but it's not always as clean as that.
So there could be some shifting from the attendance clerk to fulfill some of the secretary. That will be the negotiations.
Again,
will
that would be
happen.
the discussion and whether or not there's any what reorganization would happen, and then what would those agreements be with our labor partners.
If I recall a discussion that we've had, it wasn't always that we had 3 at the middle schools, right?
As this is my 26th year in the district, and as far as I can recall, we've had a school secretary and a secretary in the intermediate schools. Now, we do have K-8 or TK-8 programs, notably at Christopher and Indigo. There is one school secretary at both of those sites, but their sizes are not generally the same as what you would see at an intermediate school site.
And is there a possibility to have like a floating secretary when we have issues with illness or other?
We do have positions
absences?
in the district that are itinerant. We currently do not have an itinerant secretary, school secretary or secretary.
But that could be part of the discussion.
That would be part of the effects that are negotiated and discussed with our union leadership.
The next question, and I guess that's to Jorge Prado's comments. Can we explain what services that are provided the community liaisons would continue, and which staff and departments would take on those responsibilities?
So the community liaisons they are itinerant in that they support several school sites. Their schedules may vary depending on various things that are determined and looked at in ed services. It may look at how many students there are at a school site. We also take a look at, I know that Mr. Prado referred also to languages, right? If they're bilingual, biliterate, they may support other communities that are different. And so they are there to support families who may need help with navigating a school system, and maybe they are a point of contact first that is more approachable or comfortable for families if they are not familiar with our school system, or they just want somebody to talk to as a thought partner or a collaborator. Not to say that the administrator and the secretaries and teachers are not also available to parents, but they do fulfill that role. They also do sometimes support with training and workshops and things of that nature at the school sites as well. They also do help with home visits in the event that we are trying to make connection with families. Sometimes they do that in concert with administrators, but they do generally do that on their own, or maybe they may buddy up together to do those home visits as well.
So just to recap what that middle school structure looks like at the front office. So we currently have one school secretary, and an attendance clerk. Is that correct?
Yes, the attendance clerk isn't always housed right there with the school secretary and secretary, but yes. And then we have a health clerk additionally that doesn't help with the administration of the front office, but that makes up the full front office as we identify it at the intermediate schools.
What does that look like at the elementary schools, just out of curiosity?
At the elementary schools, they all have a school secretary and they have a health clerk.
In terms of, going back to Chuck's comment, can you restate which of the positions listed right now are due to attrition, or just it's an unfilled position right now?
Currently vacant.
Mm-hmm.
Currently,
Yes, currently vacant.
currently vacant. We have the administrative secretary currently that serves educational services based on a retirement. We also have the chief operations officer, which is a classified administrator position that is currently vacant. Human resources confidential secretary that is also currently vacant. And then we do have notices of positively assured attrition and other in other positions as well. But in terms to your question of vacancy, those are the ones that are currently vacant.
Can you tell us which ones have put in for retirement or have resigned?
We do have confirmation of a positively assured attrition in the 2 community liaison positions with a retirement and a resignation for next year.
Sorry, what was the last part?
A resignation or retirement for next year.
I'll let Trustee Salazar Torres ask her questions before I suggest something.
In regards to the community liaison, it looked like we have 5 positions that are part of our district for 18 schools. And so do each of the liaisons have 3 schools, or are we designated to students? Or how does that work in regards to the community liaisons, and where will that gap be once those 2? And then would it be possible to ask some of those questions to Jorge? Can I direct questions to Jorge? No, it has to be to Amy. Okay.
So there are currently 6 total community liaisons with the job title of community liaison. So with this this layoff or this resolution presented to you, that would be reduced from 6 to 4.
Okay. To 4. And then again, that was 18 schools will have 4 liaisons. And then again, connecting with the union to be able to spread out between the 4 to attain.
Yes, that would, then we would have discussions about, yes, the effects of the reduction in positions.
Okay, to be able to get. And for a community liaison, I'm just going to focus on that right now because there's just so much, especially with each position. But just with the community liaison, what is the average of students that they go out to the homes and, per community liaison? Do we have a numbers on that?
I can certainly gather more concrete numbers for you. And again, that can vary based on the needs of the districts or needs of the school. There may be some schools that have higher chronic absenteeism, which require more touch points, right, for families, depending on the communities in which they serve. There may be some communities that have more immigrant families that have come in or migrated into the community. So, and that may ebb and flow throughout the year as well. But then there is also variation between the school sites. But we can aim to get some more concrete numbers to you, but to see where those responsibilities have split and lied and where the percentages are.
Okay. And then looking at as far as, a school of 600 students, and would we say 100 students are served, 200, and it can fluctuate? Is that how we outreach community liaisons to go out based on, their schooling, how they're doing in their attendance, just different things, so they get intakes? Is that how that works?
Yeah, I can speak to that in my previous experience as a site administrator of about 650 students at the time at Parkview, and also in my position in educational services. And so our community liaison, in fact, I had the pleasure of working with Jorge Prado as the community liaison for Parkview. He would help to co-facilitate with me ABLA meetings that help support, our Latino families on a weekly basis. We would look at topics that would come on up. So I'm sure that is something that the community liaisons will do in various capacities, depending on the parent group. And then we would make our own attempts at the front office to make contact with families, through our secretaries. Sometimes even our health clerks may reach out to verify absences. But when those kind of tier 1 supports or outreach is unsuccessful, then I may, and in the past I have shoulder tap community liaisons to go and take a look at the school site. Occasionally I would accompany them, but for the most part they would go on their own or with another community liaison. They may also help with SARB at the elementary school level, especially SARB meetings, pre-SARB meetings, as well to work with families to fill out contracts and attendance contracts and things of that nature.
Okay. So based on what you're saying in regards to the time that you were a principal, we're looking at community liaison being part of the parent group, being part of direct services to students, but then also going out to homes just in the one school. And probably they're at least 2 to 3 schools for the one liaison. So we're looking at possibly with losing the 2, the stretch would be there, but then also the disconnect and loss of student services is what we're looking at.
And they also help support district-wide events as a collective as well, such as such as Cinco de Mayo and other district community resources as well. I would like to mention even outside of the schools.
Okay. So again, going from the number that we have, losing 2, student services will be cut based on what we're looking at, based on what their caseload is already, and then to add that, either incrementing more hours to their day, which I'm assuming they're full-time, 8 hours a day. I don't know if that's even something that we can do to have a liaison go 10 hours.
8-hour positions. And so
Yeah.
yes, we could, that would be the conversation based on board action tonight that we would have with our CSEA union, since they're represented by CSEA, to take a look at what those effects may be, what we would take a look at in terms of responsibility, or potentially even reclassification as well. So those will all be all the discussions that we would have.
Okay. And then I know that another one that came up was the electrician. We have 1 and we're cutting the 1. And what does that look like?
We most of our maintenance staff are called BMWs, building maintenance workers, and we've moved away from a trade specific to a generalist. The one trade specific we have is the electrician. So we will, part of that negotiations with AFSCME, not CSEA, will be what gets picked up by BMWs and what skill set, and then what level is beyond their general, and do we have to bring in specialists or whatnot?
Okay, so adding like a specialty to someone that's already on staff, and adding maybe.
Yeah, the building maintenance worker is generalist, so there's electrical they do already. The electrician tends to do the higher tier stuff. So we'll see, does that shift for the building maintenance workers? Does that level increase? And we'll negotiate that impact. And then we'll look at if there are major jobs, like we do with HVAC and other systems that we have, we bring outside contracted services in to do the big things that are beyond the scope of our staff.
Okay, all right. And librarians. In regards to librarians, I know that, again, we heard many comments tonight in regards to what that looks like, not just a checking out of books. I've seen, on campuses where, again, it's hosted for lots of different needs, and the librarian oversees a lot of different needs in their area. I did notice that I think we received, as far as the number of the 1.375, I don't have that in front of me, but I do recall that I did see it would be 4 positions for 4 hour, if I'm kind of trying to remember what I received in regards to the last email that just came in. So that would be 4 out of the 18 schools. How many librarians do we have? And then
The librarians are just at the middle schools that we're focusing on in the reductions?
Yes, library clerks currently district-wide, we have, just pulling up my spreadsheet here, 13.
we have 13. Okay.
All at varying FTE or hours. But
And
we
then
have 13
a
total.
typical librarian sits in their classroom or sits in their areas as far as the site for 4 hours a day, 6 hours a day. I believe over at Christopher, I remember speaking with the librarian. She's there twice a week for about 4 to 6 hours. Is that the typical 2 days a week? And then they kind of switch to different areas?
Yeah, so
or different sites?
What we see, and also to be clear, that number also includes a media library specialist, that total as well. But the 3 that we're talking about are on the resolution this evening. For Herman, it is 3 hours. It is 3 hours, and then for Burnell, it is 4 hours, and for Davis, it is 4 hours. The elementary schools may vary. It's 1.25 FTE at one school and 1.25 FTE at another school, so they may be itinerant. But our middle school, our intermediate school librarians, as I'm looking here and verifying with Mr. Bahupori with a look, they're only at one school site, our intermediate school librarians, our library clerks.
Okay. Why is there such a variance in work hours for the librarians?
The intermediate school librarians do serve as a support during lunchtime hours for students so that the library is open for them to be able to come in during that time period. So that is an extended, I think at the school site, it's not quite an hour, but there's additional time there as well.
Okay. I know that we spent a lot of money renovating some of the libraries and really taking the time to make it welcoming. What do you foresee with that space? Is there something, what are we going to do with that? I mean, if they're no longer available, someone in that space, has someone looked at that? Have we talked about that?
Again, I can't give a definitive answer of what this may look like moving forward, because that is going to be something in a discussion of the effects pending what the board decides this evening. And so then that is going to be our job then, of course, in HR, is to work with our unions to meet and collaborate and work towards agreements of what the effects then will be and how that will, vary or be altered at the school sites.
Okay. And then you mentioned media specialists. So they work in collaboration. So possibly there is 2 positions, and I don't see that position here. Is that part of IT?
No, that's a different job description. So library media specialist. Library media specialist works with all of our library clerks, and they help with onboarding them, training them. They also help with other capacities of organization district-wide of library materials and such.
Okay. And so those positions, how many of those do we have?
We have 1.
Just 1. Oh, for all 18. All right. Okay. Okay. Custodial. The night and the midday, is that something that I know that I've been on sites where they're there from 7 until about 10, at least at Christopher. I'm not sure other sites, and what would that look like? It looks like 1.5, so that would mean how many custodial staff do we have within our 18 schools?
I believe it's 3.5 positions. So there are positions that were increased a while ago at the intermediate sites. So we're pulling back to where we were earlier before that increase a few years ago.
So that was, you said 3?
3.5 is what I believe.
Okay.
Or a 1.0 and a 0.5. But it's a 1.5 positions. So, and they each served, my understanding, 4 hours at each middle school.
Okay, each middle school. So they come in and
So
they
were additional added to the existing staff a few years ago.
You're correct, 1.5 FTE.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and just make my statement. First, I would like to take a moment to thank Luis Velasquez, Scott Hoffman, Aaron DeRimmer, Holly Ennis, Romina Kareem, I'm going to put my glasses on, sorry, Moises, Miranda, and Deanne McEvoy. Sorry if I'm pronouncing your names wrong, but I do thank you for your emails and your input and concerns and suggestions for this district. People like yourself are engaged, concerned, and proactive in their desire to see this district thrive. The board is taking on the responsibility to ensure fiscal solvency and retain local control. I want to emphasize again that I want to keep cuts as far away from the classrooms as possible. What I did read in some of the emails, and these are just snippets from the many people that did write us, and I know not all of you were able to come up and speak, and whether you're online and you weren't able to make it, I ask that you submit to this board your comments, because again, they are important. Your community voice is heard, and we do receive that as a board. And so with that, just some of the takes that I took from that was, I know that one email was talking a little bit about asking the board to consider the long-term stewardship of the district resources. Are we doing that? And those are questions that we need to ask this board. Are we current, is the current level of staff work well and are united? So removing those positions will dismantle the great team of workers. And I know that that was your student that wrote that. A functional library is key to fostering literacy. The library investment signaled to our community that these spaces matter and are worth sustaining. Reducing staffing in these renovated facilities risks underutilizing that investment for future students. Consider the long-term cost picture when it comes to behavior support reductions more broadly, not just the IEP, mandated positions, but overall reduction in behavioral and mental health infrastructure. NPS placements will be due to lack of support. If you have any hope of attracting new students to this district, your cuts need to start at the district office level, and they need to be big, much bigger than the ones that hurt our students directly every day. Avoid layoffs at all costs and demand real accountability from district leadership. Professional and consulting services have grown from $5 million to $12.8 million. And again, those are numbers that were sent to me. You know, we just need to look at them. I'm not sure if they are restricted funds. I don't know, what they are. These were just sent to me of numbers. And so I'm reading what I received. Services and other operating costs must be reduced by at least $5 million before any discussion of layoffs occur. District leadership must justify every increase in these categories and demonstrate why consultants and outside services are being prioritized over the people who serve students. So the full extent of layoffs, again, is the worst case scenario. And I read that in regards to hopefully in the hopes of rescinding some of these. But again, my voice is, I have decided to vote no on this. When running for office, when taking this oath to office and running in my election, I vowed to provide community leadership and citizen oversight of the district. I assured my constituents that I will commit to helping the district be responsive to the values, beliefs, and priorities of this community. And I don't believe that what we're voting on will value or your priorities, not what. I don't think we've done enough to look at the budget with other means. I think we're rash in some of the, in our oversight. I know that the committees, I know Mark has done a really good job to try to get committees with our community, with teachers, with people, and I just feel like there should be more of that, more engaging, and I think we can find other cuts rather than the cuts that are being presented tonight.
I would like to first acknowledge both of our trustees up here. So I do recognize Trustee Jogalkar's concerns around our budget shortfall at this point. I also do hear Trustee Salazar Torres's concerns as well and her rationale for voting no. I think for me, when I sit on this board, I do listen to be convinced, and I think about the impacts that will be made or that will happen once these decisions are made. I also want to recognize that we are going to have to make cuts, right? But and I don't think operational efficiency cuts are going to fill that gap, right? So and because of that, I do recognize that we will have to reduce positions. With that said, there are 2 positions on this list that I would like for us to take off the resolution. And they are the community liaison position, as well as the library clerk positions. And I highlight those 2 because of the work that I do in a neighboring school district, right? I actually do work closely with the district liaisons in my school district. I see the impacts that they have with school services, with family engagement, with translation needs, and I know that when we remove those positions, there is a big gap, right? There are huge impacts to that. With the library clerks, I just feel that, it's 1.375 FTE. I don't really know how much of a cost savings that's going to generate. I don't know, Mark, do you have a number tied to that,
We did look them all up.
like savings every year?
Library clerk position will be an annual savings, all of the 1.25 total will be an annual savings of, or an impact of 93,700.
So I think just, big picture wise, I just feel that we should keep library clerks at the middle schools. I think it would be really a disservice to the school sites and to the students if we didn't have someone in that role. So with that, I don't know, President Aber, can you maybe walk me
Would
through?
you like to make a motion to remove those 2 line items from the?
Yes, so I would like to motion that we remove the community liaisons and the library clerks from the resolution.
And I'll second that. I appreciate Trustee Yu's bringing forward the amendment. The resolution before us identifies several classified positions where reductions in service may occur due to lack of work or lack of funds in the school year. However, I do believe that it's important that we carefully consider each role and the direct impact on student and families. We know that library clerks play a vital role in supporting literacy and access to books and student learning in our schools. And now that I know that during the lunch at the middle schools, they serve as a safe place for many of our students. I agree that the cost savings is not worth the impact to our students. The same thing with our community liaisons. I think that the work that they do in bringing kids back into our system and the amount that they could save through ADA by ensuring that our students are safe and are in our classrooms rather than out in the community, I think we could, it would be a cost savings rather than I think we would save money by maintaining our community liaisons. I think it would be too slim the amount of children that we have in the district to only be served by 4. That would be 4 for every 2,000 students, and that's not the typical for school districts. And so I will be supporting that motion. Any comments on that motion? Turn your microphone on.
The community liaisons, the 2 positions in the full
In
cost
total.
salary and benefits is $180,000 a year.
So you're roughly about 300,000 almost.
It's, yes, $375,000, $275,000
And
for
if-
both the library clerks and that's for both community liaisons and all of the intermediate library clerks.
And if we opt to move towards the addendum, what additional cuts would we have to make to compensate for that?
We'll have to look at that. We're currently at the Budget Advisory Committee, we're looking at the 4,000s and 5,000s, the 5,800. The Consultants and contracted services are different categories. A lot of our 5,800s that we're looking at are contracted services. They are direct services to students, actually, many of our special needs students. But one of the goals that we've been trying to do is reduce those and have them be our staff versus contracted out staff. But we'd have to look and find those savings of about $275,000 elsewhere to offset it, to keep our budget in line.
And the $275,000, how much, give me an idea of what kind of services fall within that category.
I mean, they can vary very much depending on who's providing them. If it's a classified service like a librarian, you can see that. If it's a teacher, it's a different. So
No,
you know,
I
what do you
apologize.
mean?
I wanted to get a clarification. So when we go and hunt for the $275,000 in some of the other areas, what are those areas? Like when you say I think you said 4,500 or
For the 4,000s and
the
5,000s?
4,000s and the 5,000s.
We'd have to look at what some of those
What's
services.
within that category?
Those services could be, again, contracted services that oftentimes relate to.
Can you name a few?
There are service groups that provide health care for our students. They might be nurses or LVNs, instructional assistants, resource behavior therapists. Those are oftentimes tied to student services. We could try to contract those on our own or hire them ourselves so that we might save the delta of the contracting service. So the other ones in the 4,000s would be conferences. We're losing a lot of conferences on the natural because the educator effectiveness grants are going away. So some of those funds that we've seen spent in the last few years will naturally go down because that funding source is gone. Materials and supplies, books, things like that. Field trips and stuff, but most of our field trips are paid by parents. Yeah, those are restricted funds because they're donations that oftentimes pay for the science camps and things like that. So that wouldn't be a cut that would make any difference one way or the other because they're funded from a specific source.
But this would include like field trips for
Yeah, mhm.
state parks or anything like
Right.
that.
Yeah, the biggest one that's expense driven is like the science camp for the sixth graders go on, but that's
the science
largely.
camp is self-funded.
Exactly. So most of and many of our other field trips often are supported by parents, either by driving or providing admission and contributions. So a lot of those things are donation based.
So that's a net zero.
The other thing we'll look at is we've had a big increase in electricity use, partly because of not just use, but also because of increase in rates. Are there savings we can get on the utility side? Some of our contracted services also relate to maintenance and operations. So when we have to have HVAC vendors come out and support. So are there ways to reduce those expenses, but still keep our classrooms functioning at a comfortable level?
So the little items that you're referring to, like the supplies, the maintenance contracts that we have, is there sufficient amount in those 4,000, 5,000s that?
Well, we'll be looking for that, but
would
we'll also be
support that?
looking for more in addition to that. So I don't have a definitive answer for you as far as what those are. And a lot of those will be probably goals to reduce those categories by 15% or 20%, not necessarily one specific targeted item.
And when do we have to report this to Santa Clara County Office of
Well, we'll be
Education?
doing our second interim next week. And then at the time of budget, we'll have to do the budget based on the governor's proposal and what comes out in the May revise.
And if at that point we don't have this 300,000 or 275 in there,
I think we'll be fine.
what will Santa Clara County do at that point?
I think we'll be fine for second interim. Right now, we're positive. By taking these away, we'll have to look at the multi-year to make sure we stay positive 3 years out, this year and the next 2 years. The bigger challenge will be at budget because it's the year after in 28, 29, where the reserves are exhausted for the most part, and then we'll have to figure out where to come up with the deficit that's natural in our expenditures and revenues. There are other cards to play. We have had good reports from both the Department of Finance and the Legislative Analyst's Office about tax receipts and collections and good stock market returns. So we'll see what the governor proposes in May. He has some things that he's holding back. If those come through, that will help us. But typically what we've seen is one-time dollars, so it continues the structural kicking the can down the road, having money to carry us forward, but not solving the long-term problem.
So then with that being said, can I propose an alternative to your solution, which is to hold on to those resources. But then if sufficient funding is not allocated from the governor, then we would basically have to revisit these positions.
Are you asking for a friendly amendment?
Yeah.
Um, Superintendent Chidas just reminded me that this has to happen by March 15th, that we couldn't revisit them afterwards. So. Any further discussion? And
Yeah, looking at the,
excuse me, I'm sorry, we have to keep to the board.
in regards to adding the amendment and the change with the community liaison removal and the library clerk removal, I'd like to go ahead and change my no, because I believe in taking responsibility to ensure fiscal solvency and retain local control. And I do believe that keeping these, again, at the heart of child direct services to students will make an impact in keeping the students engaged, especially in these libraries, and again, in their homes, after school, with their families, and that's very important to me.
Okay, I'll ask for a roll call vote. On the amendment where we would be supporting these minus the library clerks and the community liaisons.
Member Yolaka? No. Member Torres?
Yes.
Vice President Yu?
Aye.
President Hebert?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay. May I have a motion and a second to adjourn the meeting?
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. The special board meeting on March 3rd, 2026 is adjourned at 7:50. Good night, everybody.